So I spoke about continuous learning, right? I think I covered some of these in the response to the question before and in the previous slides, right? Learn the basics. Core skills are important. You usually, when you land in a project or as you come into the company, you do get about 2 weeks of training, right? Talk to people. Unlike on these calls when most of you are a bit shy, right? You will have to be the person to initiate the conversation, right? There will be some seniors who are nice, come up to you and say, hey, can I help you? How are you doing? But you can't expect it all the time because they are busy. They have a lot of things to do. You have to talk to your seniors, your peers. Don't live in a bounded context. What I mean by that is don't put a boundary and say, this is all I'm supposed to do. Learn as much as possible anything you want to learn. There's no limit to it. And you will find that just continues to enrich your knowledge, put you in a better place, make you understand things, and you will actually enjoy the role more as well, right? Right. And never underestimate the power of teamwork. And when I say teamwork, it's really important to understand and build good relationships with people within your team, right? So that it's not just amongst your peers, right? You have, say, 5 interns who are coming into the role, not just become good friends with only the bunch of folks who are coming in as interns because you guys came in as a batch, right? But with other interns from other institutes, maybe, with your seniors, right? Take the opportunities that are given to you. I do remember I had interns who are working with me who we have a very open door policy, right, at Virtusa. And in the research and development unit that I was working in, the head of department was an executive vice president who was very technically savvy, as well as would be really easy to talk to. Particularly would like it when the youngsters would come talk to him, and his office was just, you could see it from the place we were working. I have actually sent some of my interns to go and talk to him directly. Like if it was a question that they could ask and get an answer to, and I don't have to go, I'd be like, go talk to him. And they have, right? So you need to make the most of an opportunity like that because it gets you out of your fear of talking to people, and you realize that most people are actually nice and easy to talk to, and they will respond to you. They'll give you good feedback. They'll also give you good tips, and that will only make it easier for you. Okay? Right. The scribe. Anyone knows what a scribe is or who a scribe is? Hopefully the image itself says it, right? There's going to be a lot of writing involved, right? I think I said this before as well. So when you say documentation, I think most of you might be aware that the BA will be involved in documenting the requirements. Requirements can be documented generally in 2 main types. If it's a typical waterfall project, you'll write it as use cases. If it's an agile project, you'll write it as user stories. There's a difference. And then you will usually flesh that out into a more detailed software requirement specification. You will be expected to maintain things like a Q&A sheet because every time you interact with your client, there'll be questions you'll ask, there'll be responses you need to record, and then you'll have, say, we usually do something like maintaining traceability documents. Your requirement is what the QA team uses. Once the requirement is what we call finalized and signed off, is what the QA team will use in order to create their test cases. So there's a traceability document where it says this user story or this use case is covered by these particular test cases, right? So there'll be different artifacts, and then you'll have typically your UML notations where you draw your use case diagrams like that. And there can be many other documents and artifacts depending on the projects you get involved in, right? And very often some of these are actually now maintained on systems. So explore it and see, we call them application lifecycle management systems. Jira is very commonly used. If you are coming in, you would want to probably take a look at some of those videos on YouTube, etc. Even the Jira website actually is from, Jira comes from a brand called the Atlassian or Atlassian brand, right? So you can go check it out. And if you can explore it and say, you have some familiarity, it will be actually good for you. Pay attention to detail, obviously. right? Clear, effective written communication. I know your basic software like Jira, right? Be creative, professional, and deliver consistently, right? So two important things I also want to say is I think because English is not your first language, right? Sometimes some of you may find it much more easier, some of you may not, right? Here's the thing, English is your second language, right? For all of you, I would say pretty much for all of you, it's your second language. Just like learning any other language, whether it's Chinese or French or German or Korean or whatever it is, learning a language requires three things. You practice to you practice to read, you practice to write, and you practice to speak. So reading is something you can do. There's just so much of stuff written. You can read anywhere, right? Learn to practice writing and speaking. You will improve that skill, but don't assume that you have to perfect it. None of us are perfect because we are not, it's second language, right? You will improve as you go along, but you can do it. So don't make that the decision of, oh, I don't want to get into this, right? You have to have it at a reasonably better level than, say, a developer who is not expected to write so much as you would be expected to write, but you're not expecting absolute perfectionism either when you're starting off as an intern or at an initial role, but you just need to be able to write clearly, effectively, and communicate properly. And the other part is creativity, right? You'll be expected to also produce things which don't have a requirement specification. You have a proper structure, right? It's a very formal document. You have this, you have, say, this is the requirement part which is in scope, this is out of scope, these are the functional requirements, these are the non-functional requirements. They're very formal. Sometimes as a BA, you will be expected to contribute input for, say, a proposal, for an example. So then you have to be a bit more creative, right? So those things you will learn as you go. Your seniors will also teach you, but you have to be prepared to do, okay? Okay. So I think we've spoken a lot about change, right? I think what is important is that you're prepared to take up the challenge of dealing with the change, right? If you have something good that you think is an idea, you should share it. Don't get into this habit of thinking about what if people laugh at me. My rule for you is if they laugh at you when you try to suggest something, those should be people you ignore, right? And you shouldn't take it seriously whatsoever at all, because anyone who has gone through a typical, professional life cycle, they know how they have started and they have moved upwards, and they will always help you. So if you have a good idea and you think it's something that merits a suggestion, please go ahead with it. I'll give you a small example. When on my first project with the telco client, I was a junior QA. I had just started as an associate QA engineer. And one of the features we were testing was to be able to upload certain documents. It was not very telecom specific, but the point being, the feature was to be able to upload different Microsoft documents into a portal, right? So what happened was, by chance, when I started uploading it, it didn't work. And then I realized they had only had a requirement to be able to upload documents in the previous version of Microsoft, which basically was I don't know if you guys know it. Now, if you look at the extension on any of the Microsoft documentation, it has an X at the end, right? Docs, Excel, SX, that's how it goes. Before that, the previous version, it was doc, XLS, like that. That was the extension. So basically, accommodated the previous version, but not the latest. Somehow the Microsoft package on my machine was the latest version, which is why I couldn't upload it. So that requirement wasn't there. So I remember going back to the QA lead who was there at that time and saying this is not there. Then they said, oh, we will have to raise a change request for it. And then I was like, oh, cool, can I raise it? Because, you know, I found it, so I might as well. I said, yeah, we'll see how it goes, or something to that effect. I don't remember the exact context. But I do remember that I kept on kind of reminding the person regularly saying, hey, I think we need to raise a change request for this, right? Until I think just before I left, they actually approved the change request. Very small thing, but the point I want to make is if I kept on thinking, oh, but I'm a junior, I don't really want to say this, I've already said it once, no point saying it again, you're not going to move forward. So if you have a good idea, right, take a chance and say it. Project manager, you have to be able to do a bit of PM work as well, right? So I know you're not going into a PM role, but as you move up your career path, and this is pretty much for any role, is that you need to be able to multitask a bit, manage multiple items, because you will typically not be working only on one task per day. So you need to sit and focus on that. You may have to work collaboratively with your team members where they have to give you input, you have to give them input. So you need to be able to, especially if you're working from home, in terms of how you plan your calls and things, and then how you learn to manage various stakeholders, okay? Salesman, I think I said this. Important thing is that you learn to present, right? And also important thing, if you're going for a customer call or a call with a client, you should do your background checks. Now, 2 important points on this. Very often when you come for an interview, I ask this question, right? I say, why, you know, this particular organization? And I get some very standard responses sometimes, which is okay. I occasionally get very creative responses, right? And sometimes people get lost and they're like, now what annoys me about that is you're coming for an interview, it's your first interview, you don't know how an interview works before, which means you need more practice, but it looks like you've not even bothered to actually figure out what might be standard questions asked and at least think up of a creative response. Right? So I don't usually appreciate that because it kind of gives me the impression that you're not too bothered. And that's the point. Presentation. One thing is, I don't know whether you guys are doing presentations. I was on a call before with another one of my interns from a different institute. And I don't know the kind of feedback you get from your lecturers and those who evaluate your presentation. But apart from the content, it's really important to learn how to actually talk in a presentation, how to maybe structure your presentation. And also another part is in between, you're going to have to get used to people throwing questions at you. So maybe when you're doing these group projects, guys, don't, I mean, I know how group projects work, right? There might be 10 in the group, usually about 6 of them who work, the remaining 4 kind of pitch in only at the end, right? But you should try and make it an opportunity to be able to evaluate each other, maybe I might say, not evaluate maybe, but help each other out. Like one person presents, someone else asks questions, so that not only do you get ready for maybe that final presentation with your lecturer, but you also actually get used to how it happens in reality. Very often on client calls, you'd find that there's only a very few people who are nice and keep the questions till the end. Very often they will actually throw questions to you in between you presenting. So then you have to quickly like learn to either answer it then or say, I will answer your question at the end. And even to give a response, it's usually something that you may have to think a bit, right? So those are things that you can start practicing now. And you are not by all means expected to know all of this, be good at all of this when you start. I hope that is very clear. I'm telling you what your journey would look like. I'm not talking to you about what your first week, first month, or first year as a BA is. I'm telling you what this journey, which I would assume for you to say it's a journey, is at least 5+ years, right, is going to look like. Negotiation skills will be important, right? You'll get into a very few or at least certain conversations where it will require you to either push forward, know when to back off. It's an art. It takes time to learn. I would say it's a continuous learning thing. Even some of us are still learning, right? But it'll be something important. And always be prepared to teach other people as well, right? This is one of my favorite quotes because leadership is actually about making other people better as a result of your presence and making sure the impact lasts even if you're not there. People should be able to, including as you go up the ladder or even as you start, right? Help your peers. If they don't understand something and you do teach them, ask them so that they can teach you back something they don't. And always make sure that in that setting, that's how you actually enable teamwork. Therefore, say for an example, there are 3 of you interns working on a particular requirement and one of you falls sick, the other 2 should be able to continue, right? They shouldn't be dependent on you and thinking, but she's the only one who knows this part of the requirement. She's the only one who knows how this particular UI should be. There shouldn't be a case like that. Work should seamlessly continue, and that way the team doesn't suffer. And that person also can actually take their sick leave without having to worry about what's going on with the requirement, right? For an example. So important to teach. All of you have different things that you're much better at doing versus not so good at doing. Share it, exchange it, and make the most out of it. Okay, we are at the end. Any questions? This is what you need to ask yourself. Some of you at the start said, I don't really know what this role might look like. So in order to make a decision, you need to have knowledge about it. Have I hopefully given you as a starter, right? Like, I mean, I obviously cannot cover everything. Have I given you an introduction to what your role might look like and what you might be expected to do?